ready for this? 'Cause I can do
Voices of Victory Podcast Show. Voices of Victory. Voices of Victory. Voices of Victory. Voices of Victory Podcast Show.
It's now time for the Voices of Victory Podcast Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Mario Delia.
And welcome to Voices of Victory podcast. My name is Mario. Welcome aboard if it's your first time here. Today's topic, cultural boundary erosion. Let me say that again. Cultural boundary erosion. That's what it's all about. Boundaries, right? We're getting into boundaries now. Boundaries, but it's a different point of view. This is not relationship boundaries. So if you're new to my show, welcome and welcome back. We don't just talk about culture here. We unravel it. We laugh at it. And then we figure out how to put it back together better than a bunch of blocks in Jenga. So let's go ahead and do it all in one piece. We're going to tackle something that might sound harmless, but actually can create a whole host of problems in any organization. Culture boundary erosion. That's what it's all about. You know what that is, that slow creep where certain roles within a new startup company start to blur. It's like two people having two different roles, and then the lines between them start to blur, and it sends a message of confusion to all the new staff. And the expectations turn into a Picasso painting. And suddenly, you're the office's IT support, snack coordinator, and emotional support human being because all of these roles are getting blurred. Spock has melded them together. Let's dive into what that is, why it happens, and how to stop it before your workplace turns into a giant, chaotic episode of a bad reality television show. If the roles are blurred, what message are you sending? Now, let's unpack what it actually is. Picture this. Imagine this for a moment. You're at work. Your boss asks you, hey, we need your help. We need your help with a little project. No problem, right? You jump into beast mode, totally activated. You fast forward 3 weeks down the line, and now you're leading the project, hosting meetings on top of it, and wondering when, just when, you'll get promoted without the pay bump. That, my dear friends, is boundary erosion in action. Now, some people will say, oh, well, he's just helping out, assuming more responsibilities. Actually, you're sending a message. Because I'm sure we wear many hats, but when we wear that many hats, we could start sending out the wrong signals. So let me see if we could break this down a little bit. It's not the hat wearing that's the problem. It's conveying to the entire team what your role is and not communicating confusion to them. That's what I mean. That's why it's important. That's why I help startup companies with their culture and their strategies behind them. It's when the roles and responsibilities that were once clear and crisp as day are suddenly foggy, just like a dark London evening. The lines have been blurred and accountability starts to melt away like chocolate in August. And guess what? You're now left in this weird professional limbo where you're doing everything and mastering nothing. So it's not just the fact of taking on more responsibility, it's that it's starting to communicate the wrong message. And let's be real, it's exhausting. You go to work to do your job, right? You go to work to help the startup grow and get better, but not do everyone else's role. But boundary erosion says, oh, you wanted to focus. Oh, I see. Oh, that's cute. Yeah. You can't focus because you're doing 2 billion things at once. So there is a fine line between, let's say, taking on multiple hats and then taking on multiple positions in the sense that it's communicating bad messages to the entire staff. So why does this even happen to begin with? That's the $1 million question here. Why do workplace boundaries crumble like a badly baked old cruddy cookie? We're going to break it down with a little bit of humor and a little truth serum along the way. It's creating an overlapping roles dance. It's like imagining two people tasked with overseeing operations. It sounds like teamwork, right? It sounds like it's nothing wrong with it, right? Wrong. It's more like a tango of confusion when you start blending two roles together. Who's responsible for what? Who's responsible for what? No one knows. They all look at each other and say, I don't know, I think he does this. I saw him do that. I wasn't really sure, right? So roles aren't being communicated wisely. And because no one wants to admit it, everyone just pretends that they're on the same page. Because we're all assuming something. Like each one of us is assuming 9 roles because it's a startup. It's a new company, right? So we all have to assume those hats. So we're all secretly dreading that next email that we have to send out that may have unclear expectations and a whole comedy full of errors. Have you ever worked an assignment that kind of sounded like this? It's like, can you just, handle it? Handle what? Oh, the spreadsheets, the presentation, the existential crisis, everything. The little gremlin under my desk needs to be put to rest. Unclear expectations. That's what it's all about. It's a breeding ground for boundary erosion. And now that moves us on to another principle, and that's the hero syndrome, because this happens a lot in startup companies, especially to people that feel that they're a stakeholder and hold themselves responsibility in the organization. But it's like the hero syndrome is like, oh, this is a fun one. You've got that one colleague, or maybe it's you, no judgment, who says, don't worry, I'll take care of it. For everything. And at first, they're the office hero. But over time, their cape starts to fray because they've now spread themselves too thin. They've overcommitted themselves. They're not paying attention to their energy. Forget about schedule, just their energy. They're feeling under-supported, and it creates this all-hands-on-deck culture. And some workplaces think that, we're a pirate ship here. All hands on deck. Sounds exciting. I don't know. Until you're scrubbing the proverbial poop deck instead of steering the actual ship from the iceberg that's up ahead. So, you know what? This mentally kills role clarity because suddenly everyone's doing everything. And sometimes you could say that the organization doesn't want to reach into their pocket and start hiring new roles, hiring new people. And that takes us over to leadership blind spots. There's blind spots and aversions for everything. And even organizations have a blind spot and aversions, things they push away. It's like, well, that's not in our wheelhouse, which may be true. There's nothing wrong with an aversion, but sometimes there's organizations that open up themselves to something new and create an entirely different new market with that. So that's just a side note. But the leadership has blind spots. Let's not just forget the bosses. Okay, sometimes leaders do not set clear boundaries because they assume that people will, quote unquote, figure it out. You're smart enough, right? You'll figure it out, right? Spoiler alert, they don't. This is a lack of clarity. and it trickles down the entire food chain until the whole organization is one big game of, well, whose job is this? When you start to see arguments of who's supposed to do this? I thought this person was supposed to, I thought that person was supposed to take the water bottle and put the full one on top of the cooler, right? Everybody's going to argue about it. That's when you know it's bad, when there's fights over who does what. So, how do we fix this without losing our mind and falling into insanity, right? How do we fix boundary erosion with positions? It isn't just impossible, it's absolutely necessary. Otherwise, you know what? You're going to look at a bunch of people that'll quit on you because they're tired of the burnout and the resentment and the miscommunication and the revolving door full of frustrated employees. So how do we patch these cracks up? How do we solve this? And the answer is really straightforward. Clearly define roles. Write them down. Make sure they're visible. No more vague descriptions like team players or special handles or nicknames or miscellaneous tasks. Be specific. You could always create a department called office services, and they handle everything from the copy paper all the way down to the water cooler, even moving desks from point A to point B in office supplies. Like, it can be done. It can be done. They can even deliver mail in-house in the office. Be specific, because if the roles overlap, you gotta address it, folks. Address it up front instead of hoping for the best. Set expectations clearly and stick to them when you're assigning tasks to people. Be crystal clear about who's doing what. We see this, by the way, you see boundary erosion in companies that don't have much of a culture. And they're the ones with the really bad reviews on Indeed or Glassdoor. That's how you know. That's how you know, folks. With the whole you'll figure it out mindset. It doesn't count as a plan. I'm sorry. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to encourage that. You know what we're going to encourage? We're going to encourage boundary setting, because this is for the leaders and the team members, the collective. We've got to normalize saying, hey, that's outside of my scope. I know a person that can do that. And I can help you find that right person right now. Because healthy boundaries make for healthy teams. That's important. Okay? The regular check-ins of communication is the very oil that keeps the boundary machine running just right. So yes, checking in with people and clarifying any confusion. It prevents roles from veering off. Some jobs that you actually, come on board with, they give you like a full document, a full complete layout of all your responsibilities. They actually are smart enough to lay it out on day one. I've seen that happen before. But we're talking about startups, folks. We're talking about startups here, okay? We're talking about culture for startups. And if you're a leader, you got to lead by example. If you're listening, you've got to practice it. Don't blur your own boundaries and expect your team to stay on track. I'm not referring to big companies here. I'm talking about startups, nonprofits, tech startups. That's who I deal with primarily. So a reality check is important. We got to look at the boundaries and make sure they're not eroding. That it's not just a corporate problem. It's a human problem. It happens in families, happens in friendships, it happens in our personal lives when roles aren't clearly outlined. So how many of us have actually agreed to, let's say, help a friend move only to end up painting their entire apartment because boundaries weren't set and communication wasn't expressed, wasn't clear, there was no clarity? The solution is the same: clarity, communication, and the courage to say, you know what? That role, the person who's best suited for that is so-and-so. There's a difference between saying that and that's not my job. It's kind of like the negative aspect of it. And say the person who takes care of that is. You see the difference between positive language and negative language? Real simple. Well, that's it for today and this wonderful episode. Just remember, culture boundary erosion. It might be very, very sneaky, but it's not invincible. And with the right tools, if you're a startup company, the right tools are going to help you. And maybe a sense of humor along the way. Because guess what? You can always rebuild those boundaries and create a workplace that's clear, focused, and thriving. Very important. Very important. So just remember, this is not aimed at the larger, ginormous corporations. This is the little tiny startups that are just coming on. They could have been 6 months, 9 months, a year. Depends on what phase of the business you're actually in, but you get the idea. Now, for our sponsor, NoLimitEmails.com, make sure you check them out. They're amazing. NoLimitEmails.com, a comprehensive email marketing tool with a live streaming tool added onto it. And there's 3 packages you could choose from when you click on the Warrior Plus link. And when you click on that link, the very good news is you get 60% off of one of those 3. You just have to choose which one. But when you click that link, you get 60% off one time. And that's pretty much it. Check the Warrior Plus link within the description of this podcast and have a great day.